came from the oceans, the forests and plains. Our people had thoughts before they had names. Our hands made the mark for tomorrow to know. In case we don't make it, we were man, this was our home. Wise mothers and fathers, every child of mankind, carrying the story, what awaits us in time. For tomorrow we're born, the story's ours to write. Together tell the dawn, we survive the night. Remember, my child, that we set you free. Write the future story for you and for me. Before we knew borders, this world was our home. Sheltered and planted with words and with stone. Buried tools with our dead, told the story once more. With iron and wind, brought our story to shore. Wise mothers and fathers, we will carry your names in your words and ours. We'll pass on the flame. For tomorrow we're born, the story's ours to write. Together tell the dawn, we survive the night. Remember, my child, that we set you free. Write the future story for you and for me. Little one, remember that the story is alive. The past is important, but the future is wide. We chose to bring you here, so our story doesn't end. Please don't quit forever, just rest and try again. For tomorrow we're born, the story's ours to write. Together tell the dawn, we survive the night. Remember, my child, that we set you free. Write the future story for you and for me.
Well, now, that was a lovely start. Hopefully you guys can all hear me. Everybody hear me okay? Give me a shout out from out there if you can hear the audio. We got into trouble with this last time. Still have not found my other light. It's around here. This was looking better before I sat down. Oh, hi. Let me just adjust some settings here before we get going. I really gotta find the light that I took with me to Arizona. And where was I last? Where was I? In Salt Lake. And then I broadcast from the other place, from hell. Just kidding. Oh, because I'd gone up to meet with and to record with Chief Mitiga. Some of you were able to see that. Hopefully you get a little bit of breeze going here in St. George area. This is terrible. This is terrible, man. Let me get I'll just get my color balance a little closer to right. I have really got to figure out what I did with that other light. That's better, right? at the fill. That was a problem from last time. The fill was more. Sorry, guys. So, as many of you know, I had kind of a rough week. Hopefully, you guys aren't shouting in my comments here, going, "You can't hear you." Okay, better, right? All right. Had kind of a rough week, and so I was going to do just an upload. Then, like, a whole bunch of things came together last minute. It's a possibility that after sermon we'll have a chance to interview a couple of Mormon prophets. Okay, not Mormon prophets in the sense you traditionally know, but Chief Mitiga might be coming on. Where our plan right now is to go live at 10 local. He is going to be broadcasting from Germany and agreed to tell us exclusively about some of the plans that he is making right now, together with the Mayan elders that he says he's working with down in Mexico. So I'd rather he was talking to me about it than that he was telling, for example, telling other people about it. Tell less about it. And he's been very courteous to me. I'm very impressed with so far with my communications with David Taylor, and he's a nice guy, and so I'm grateful that's working out so far. But today I wanted to tell you a little bit about the future story. So this is a thing I've been working on for a while. It still needs a little bit of polish, but when I am having a rough time carrying on, I ask myself, what would a world where life is worthwhile look like? Because I often think that. Am I freezing for you guys? Are you guys seeing me like lock up and freeze here? Everybody, am I moving fluidly for you? Let's just give it a quick touch up to our camera settings. I'm pretty sure that's just a RAM issue. As soon as my After Effects is done exporting, I have 2 new hymns. I hope you guys liked the future story. It's going to make a little more sense, those of you who are curious about that. And it just finished. But we have another one that I was inspired this afternoon, and so I made another one. Oh, it's much more fluid now. Look at that, much more fluid. That's darker, but good. I can close my After Effects. And so here very soon we'll have another Godless hymn. This is like some 30 Godless hymns we've got at least so far. I haven't even got them all published on the website yet. In any event, hi, I'm Joe, and we are the Church of Korihor, a spiritual community for godless people. Just last week, I was talking about how I almost never have an existential crisis anymore, where I used to have them quite frequently. And this seems to me to have been one of the most important things I do. Am I stuck for MB says stuck? Nikki says no. How about now? Better? Everybody says better? Cool. Anybody yet? Just holler at me. So when I am in a bad way, I often ask myself, what would a world look like where life was worth living? Because it's so difficult to say, especially because so many God religions, which is most religions, have you noticed, tend to tell you nothing about what makes life worth living. They want to tell you about why you are a sinner. They want to tell you why you need salvation. They want to tell you why the church needs money. They want to tell you why things aren't. I listen to you, MB. It's a good question, Andrew. Real hunger and thirst? Maybe 3-4 months ago. But I see people all the time with it. So I just want to make sure. What are you talking about, Andrew? I'm not caught up with whatever Andrew's on about. So I'm gonna keep on with my sermon here. I don't want to make you feel ignored. Hey Jay, how you doing? It's good to see you guys. I'm going to close my comments just for a few minutes while I finish while I get this fired up and running, 'cause we don't want to lose track of it. By the way, so after my comments today, after the sermon today, I am going to play our closing Godless hymn, and then hopefully we'll have Tim, who is a something of a Mormon prophet. I don't know that he calls himself that. He'll get a chance to talk to us. He's debating it, possibly coming on. But then at 10 p.m., we are going to, it looks like, have Chief Mitiga with us live. And so I'm very excited about that. So you'll want to tune back in. We'll close the sermon link, and then I'll immediately launch with a new link. That's what I found in the past is really the necessary way to get this done. Thank you very much, Mary Beth. You're awesome. Um, and so I often ask myself, what makes life worth living? Because while religions don't really have a good answer and really don't make any good attempt to make an answer, I think that Korohorism is ideally situated to it. We are the first godless church, I think, to really advocate for that every person's subjective reason to live is valid, and the reason to carry on is a good reason. But like everybody else, I have to go constantly refining mine. And that's where I have frequently come back to this idea of the future story. And it's a little eclectic, it's a little weird. I wouldn't have it any other way. And very sci fi ish, as you can tell. I haven't completely finished pre-writing this, but I found that with complex sermons like this, it's easier if I pre-write them rather than just ramble. By the end, I'm going to end up telling you a story that's going to be a little rambly. This is very, very true to form for me. So this is how it goes. Is this the life worth living? I mean, who even are you? It's easy to overthink and think and think. But it's not always easy to answer the really hard questions about life. Now, you are a conscious event in a universe that doesn't seem to make sense unless there is a consciousness to try to make it make sense. It's pretty freaky to think about. Some believe that this universe doesn't make sense with or without us, because there has to be a consciousness observing it from outside the universe. And this consciousness is the cause of the universe. And this consciousness is good to the universe, including to you and me. And this consciousness is God. Would have to be. What else could it be? But when you ask them why good God doesn't do good things, they will give you an excuse, something about footprints in the sand or mysterious ways or big pictures, or you are so dumb and he is so great and trusting in arms and blah, 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 blah. Maybe you find those excuses convincing. How nice for you. Have a great day. No? Yeah, me neither. If life were worth living, it would look very different. It would be clear to us from the cradle to the grave why we suffer. I don't see that world with my eyes, but I can imagine one. In a world where life is worth living, an aging person would have pulled you aside when you were just old enough to talk and to ask questions like, why is it like this? Why is everything hard to do? Why did you people bring me into this world? And then this elder that you know and trust would invite you to a beautiful event, the telling of the future story. There would probably be candy and toys because, well, everyone likes candy and toys, and chances are you'd be a child when this questions really start to land for you. Unfortunately, long before most of us become adults, we start to weigh heavy existential questions. You and your elder would go to the story room where your parents, your friends, other children just like you would gather to eat candy and to hear the telling of the future story. This is it. Little one, you didn't have to be born. We could have just decided to not bring you into the world, but we were lonely without you, and we were curious what you would bring to our story if you became real. That excitement is the reason why you exist. We wanted to meet you, and now that we have, we like you just the way you are. If you know, you know. Whoops, lost my place. Oh, it's never a good full godless sermon unless I screw up somewhere. Now, partly because you look like us, and humans like humans that look like them. It's actually kind of a problem, and we're going to get to that. Look now to the elder who brought you here. As we age, some of us are growing tired and see that our individual end is coming. Not today, probably, but soon. You don't need to feel sad for us because we are not sad. We have done our part. We have added our verse to our story. We have made many mistakes and we have had precious few victories. But we have done our best. And just like the many generations before us, our time is slowly drawing to a close. We are not afraid for our story to end because of you. The future is how our story ends. Your future is how our story ends, or more importantly, how it doesn't end. Let me explain. No, there's too much. Let me sum up. The story of Homo sapiens sapiens. It's a funny name from an old language. It means wise, wise man. As you could probably imagine, we gave ourselves this name. Our people are apes, great African apes to be precise. Our ancestors looked quite different, but were so familiar. After all, they had children who were just like you. Those children played like you do. They grew up like you will. Sometimes they found love, like you almost certainly will. They learned work as you will need to do. They had troubles, some that they overcame, others that they did not. Tall and short, old and young, fortunate and unfortunate. They dedicated their entire lives to a future that they would not live to see. We call this need to survive the will. It's as natural as the hair on your head or the blood in your veins. All your different, beautiful shades of skin. The will is universal for us as it is with all life from our world. Ah, yes. Our world. Earth. No one knows for sure how many other planets in the universe are like ours. We have found a few that look familiar. However similar or dissimilar to us, the beings on those worlds are. They are not us because we are from Earth. Our ancestors are from Earth, and you are from Earth. That might not make you very special to the universe, but it makes you very special to us. As our ancestors lived and learned, their children were born with bodies better suited to the future. Some learned to make tools with their hands. We called them Homo habilis, handy man. Some became better at moving around to avoid predators and find resources. Their legs grew longer and their hips narrower. We called them Homo erectus, or upright man. Our ancestors got better and better at organizing, communicating, and thinking. And as they became better at thinking, they grew larger and larger brains, which was a good thing sort of. Now, bigger brains need more room. So the children of our ancestors had bigger heads. We called them Homo sapiens or wise man. Sound familiar? But moving while bringing big headed babies into the world became difficult and dangerous for the mothers of Homo sapiens. So we learned to stay put. Rather than run from our predators, we stood our ground and faced them. Yes, think, wise man. We built shelters, we made tools and weapons. Oh, go, wise man, go. We planted crops and tamed animals. We grew food and made recipes. We made beer, and that turned out to be pretty great. Way to think, wise man. To keep from getting bored by staying in one place all the time, we imagined things. Funny things, sad things, explanations of things. Where we came from, what was out there. But most importantly, we imagined what the future should hold. Oh, yeah. Think, wise man. Think about the future. With our able hands, we left our mark so that in case we don't make it, the future would remember that we were here and we had glorious visions in our brilliant minds. We created art, music, drama, dance. As we shared the beauty of the world that could be, we became more than families or groups. We became truly wise men. But while the will could be inherited through DNA, it was the ideas of our minds, our story, that made us wise men. Luckily, by that time, we had developed language, the ability to transfer between generations the story of our future. Stories as different as the land where our people settled, as different as the game we hunted, the homes and tools we made, the weather that we survived, the food we ate, the children that we had, and our hopes for them and for their children. Today, we call these stories epics and legends, with characters who were, not surprisingly, just like us, but powerful. Villains and heroes, great human-like beings to warn us and to inspire us, and ultimately, devils to lure us to our worst vices, and gods to compel us to our greatest virtues. Homo sapiens thrived. And as we did, we started to compete over whose version of the story was better, even best. The epics and the epics and legends became religion and scripture. These stories were not true, but that wasn't the point. They were a way of remembering the story of the future, and it worked. We expanded across Earth, bringing our story with us in all its wondrous variety. Groups became states. Oh, yeah. Think, wise man. States became nations. Think, wise man. Think. Nations became empires. Hold up, wise man. Think harder. The fight to control the story of the future grew our greatest strength into a predator of our own making. War. With all our thinking and becoming, we had forgotten to make room for others' versions of the story, to appreciate that the beauty of our story was as much about its variety as its nobility. It was variety of appearances, of stories, of families that made us wise men, made us who we are. In the midst of the story of Homo sapiens, there was a mind that changed everything. He wasn't a god or an angel. He was a mere mortal man, Siddhartha, or the Buddha. He introduced a simple truth about each of us and our individual stories. It's another word from an old language, but one that's easy to say. Dukkha. Maybe you can say it. Dukkha. It's a word that is beautiful in its sadness. In Pali, the language of the Buddha, a ka is a hole in the middle of a wheel, and duh means bad. The Buddha wanted us to know that the cycle of the wheel of our daily lives wobbles around a hole. That is bad. That hole is suffering. This became known as the first noble truth of Buddhism. Dukkha. All that is born suffers. Siddhartha was a prince who abandoned everything: riches, power, life at court, a wife and family. A man who was handed everything that most people fight their whole lives to get. But because he hadn't suffered to get it, it was meaningless to him. So he dedicated his life to understand why even the most fortunate humans suffer. Right around that same time, far away in Athens, the philosopher Socrates said, "Life contains but two tragedies. One is not to get your heart's desire. The other, to get it." It's like a video game. If it's too hard, you get fed up, you lose interest. If you beat the game, you get bored with playing it. You also lose interest. Then it's about the new game, then the newer game, and newer game. When will we make the perfect game that we will never bore of? And if we did, would we even want to play it? A legend emerged in nearby Palestine around that same time. Adam and Eve, the first parents, ate the fruit of a tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was against the rules. Seems a silly rule, but makes sense over time. We'll come to that. Because they did this, God punished them, saying, "Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life." Oof. So knowing good and evil is a curse? Thinking about what makes life worth living caused us to overthink sometimes, just like the Buddha and Socrates. Judaism and its successors, Christianity and Islam, taught us to think that just as we have a will to thrive, so there is another will that hurts us on purpose in order to teach us a lesson. And that will is God's will. Ooh. Even Plato, who was either the teacher of Socrates or maybe was Socrates, said that suffering is the price of wisdom, that people should not just suffer in order to obey the gods, but to understand why the gods were so good and just good enough to want for us to suffer. Well, that made no damn sense to Epicurus, who rejected God's will and gave us instead the problem of evil. If God is both loving and powerful, then why would there be suffering at all? Oh, think about that, wise man. So, if suffering isn't proof of God's will, it's proof that there is no such will, that there are no gods. Okay, so then, why does everyone suffer? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that the will that drives us to survive also drives our suffering. Oh, wait, what? Hey, check it out. It's raining down here. Thanks for sending us the rain, Cache Valley. Life is a pendulum, Schopenhauer said, that swings ever backward and forward between pain and boredom. Well, now that sounds familiar. If it seems like this German philosopher must have read the Buddha, that's because he had. Somewhere along the way between the first Homo sapiens to venture from the cradle of humanity, Africa, we became more than wise man. We became man that thinks of the future and sometimes too much and has little overthinking attacks that can sometimes make you wish you were never born to begin with. So that's a mouthful. And we already have this cool naming convention going with the short names like Homo sapiens. So we had become something new. Homo sapiens, sapiens, wise, wise man. It's kind of a dumb name, which is ironic given what it means. It's important to have a sense of humor about ourselves. Now, our parents, my generation, they didn't understand the future story as well as we do. At least we like to think so. And we don't understand it as well as you will. Now you see why we were excited to meet you, why we decided the world needed you, and you are sitting here with us. Because now that we have met you, we like you just the way you are. We aren't going away, at least not right away. We have a little time together, a precious little time to help you along the way to a future that we will not live to see. The future story is your story, little one. Never forget this one thing. You can quit. You can quit the future story forever or just for a while. That's your right. Please don't quit forever. Forever is coming for each and every one of us. Please try to remember that to see the future doesn't require you to do anything but breathe. Just breathe and hydrate and eat. And there are actually quite a few things you have to do, but the breathing thing is the most urgent one. So for now, just breathe and the future comes. If you have to quit, please just quit for a while. Everyone has to do it sometimes. Take a break, get some exercise, get away from this place. Whatever you need to do, just don't quit forever. We overthink, wise man. And if it seems to you that you must choose whether to quit breathing or to quit believing in the story, quit the story. Fuck it. Who cares? Please don't quit forever. Remember that the story is just a story. It's not even true. Well, it's truer than that Adam and Eve bullshit, but the story of the future is being written all the time. And it's easy to get fed up with the version that you inherited from others. In fact, it's practically necessary. That frustration is how the future story is written. Change it, scrap it, rewrite it, make it better. Just don't quit. Not forever. Quit this draft of the story just for a while. And if you have to change it to make it worth believing in again, change it. And remember, millions of years of the generations of Homo sapiens sapiens gave everything so that you could rewrite this story. When it inspires you, then it's a good story. When it doesn't, remember, it's just a story. I want to show you something. Let me see if I can find it. I had great success with finding image files with StreamYard here. There's this thing called Schopenhauer. Cool. Now, I want to tell you about a man named Arthur Schopenhauer. If you need a role model in life, and you have confidence issues, you could do worse than a guy who wakes up on picture day and says, "This hair. This hair is the hair." You say, "Joe, anybody can have a bad hair day on picture day." That's adorable. Let me show you something else. This was every picture day. Every picture day. The man's whole life. Every picture day. Watch this. I'll show you another one. This one, he had painted when he was young, and he actually sat for the painting. This is when he had a full head of hair. You see, Arthur Schopenhauer had a good sense of humor about himself, sort of. Sort of. He was considered, generally speaking, to be quite attractive, but no women really wanted to go out with him, and there were good reasons for that. And he believed all his life, and he said that women will find a man attractive, even marry a man who is ugly, before they would ever marry a man who was unmanly. Now I ask you, the young man you see there, do you see him as particularly unmanly? As far as I know, women didn't find Arthur Schopenhauer to be unmanly. His father did. You see, Arthur Schopenhauer's father was Heinrich Schopenhauer, and he was a very hard man. And he was always depressed, and he was very anxious. He married a woman, I think, some 20 years his junior, I believe, Joanna Schopenhauer, who really never made any mystery of the fact that, well, she married him for his money and his station in life, and because she wanted to become a novelist. And marrying a wealthy man who was, frankly, not going to stick around forever was her best chance at making that dream happen. And so this man who was already pretty cold brought two children, Arthur and his little sister Adele, into the world, and with a woman who didn't really show him a lot of affection. And that was his own arrangement. That was his own deal. He chose that, right? So he doesn't get to complain. What you need to know about this is that Heinrich Schopenhauer, he got very sick. And his wife, instead of caring for him because, well, she didn't really feel like she had that kind of relationship with him. And anyways, he didn't really treat her like he deserved better. Well, she went on, carried on with her social life and didn't really stop and care for him at all. And then one day he was drowned in a canal adjacent to their house. That was the official cause of death. But everyone knew. He'd gone to the attic of their house and jumped into the canal from there. And Arthur Schopenhauer blamed his mother. But he really should have paid more attention to his own feelings. But he was just a boy. He was just young. He didn't understand these things. I read through some of his father's his father's letters. That's what we used to call emails, which are like text messages, which are whatever. And his father would berate him for not writing manly enough, for not studying manly enough courses at school, especially while he was at school in England. That his father wanted him to go into business and do something productive with his mind and quit wasting all of his time with frilly nonsense like swimming lessons that are just dangerous or philosophy lessons that have no practical use in the world. And so Arthur Schopenhauer had a lot of this dug into his brain, his father's anxieties cast onto him, his father's need to be perceived as manly and useful and productive so that he could become wealthy. And he had that wealth. He kept that wealth. And then nobody wanted to be around him. His wife didn't want to be around him. His children were afraid of him. And then when he got sick, there was no one to care for him. And lonely, he quit. He quit the story forever. And most of Arthur Schopenhauer's life, he lived until he was 72 years old. He was circling around that same drain. It was not long after his father passed away and he received his inheritance that Arthur Schopenhauer quit studying business and switched to law. Didn't really love that, so he switched to medicine. Well, it's a familiar story to anybody who's been to college. Eventually, he settled on philosophy. And while he was studying philosophy, he had to quiet this mind. He loved reading philosophy. He loved studying philosophy. He loved writing philosophy. But he had this mind that troubled him with accusations that he wasn't manly enough, that he wasn't good enough, that he'd never be good enough, and questions about who does he blame for his father's death. He could blame himself. I was a disappointment to my father, so my father quit. He could blame his mother, and he surely did. He would, at least one letter he wrote to his sister Adele. He flatly accused his mother, saying if she had just had the ability to take a little time out of her social calendar, maybe their father would still be alive. His mother found that letter. She did not like it. Eventually, he moved back in with his mother and his sister, and they found themselves very difficult to get along with one another, especially because Arthur Schopenhauer didn't approve of his mother's new boyfriend who had moved into their house and lived off of their wealth and was not his father. And so in 1814, I believe, his mother wrote him a letter telling him that the relationship between them was over. I think I actually have it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a little. In fact, she said, "You are not an evil human. You are not without intellect and education. You have everything that could make you a credit to human society. Moreover, I am acquainted with your heart and know that few are better. But you are nevertheless irritating and unbearable, and I consider it most difficult to live with you. All of your good qualities become obscured by your super cleverness, and all are made useless to the world merely because of your rage at wanting to know everything better than others, of wanting to improve and master what you cannot command. With this, you embitter the people around you, since no one wants to be improved or enlightened in such a forceful way, least of all by such an insignificant individual as you still are. No one can tolerate being reproved by you, who also still show so many weaknesses yourself, least of all in your adverse manner, which in oracular tones proclaims this is so and so without ever supposing an objection. If you were less like you would only be ridiculous. But thus as you are highly annoying." That was actually an earlier letter. The next letter, we don't have his letters to her because she destroyed them. The next letter, significant letter, she told him she was going to the countryside and that when he had slammed a door in the house, which is bad behavior, bad form, she decided that he had closed the door on their relationship, and that at that moment, she disowned him, would have nothing to do with him ever again. And Arthur Schopenhauer went on in his life, in his future, in his story, carrying that. That was his story now. And as you can imagine, it causes a person a lot of grief to have a father who put those thoughts in his head when he was young and then closed the door on him so darkly, and then have a mother disown him in such a way. And so naturally, whenever women didn't want anything to do with Arthur Schopenhauer, he chalked it up to that, well, he wasn't manly enough. Otherwise, women would love him. Or he would chalk it up to women are self centered and always, only looking to make money and get and use men for their money and use men for their status and power because, well, his mother very proudly felt that way about his father. And he blamed all of his problems, frankly, on women. And he wrote about that in an essay called On Women. And he was not nice, and there's no excuse. There's no excuse. He became known as the world's most dastardly misogynist. At the same time, that with all of his other philosophy, he became respected the world over and widely read as perhaps the wisest philosopher to ever live. And at that time, he learned to study Buddhism. He wrote a masterful work called The World as Will and Representation, sometimes called The World as Will and Idea, sometimes World as Will and Presentation. But effectively, he took this concept of Buddhism, and particularly the dukkha, and he made it into his own. And he had deep, deep respect for the Buddha. In fact, he is often called the wisest philosopher to ever live because he was the first to take and understand all of the Greek and all of the Stoics, the Epicureans, the hedonists, the metaphysicists, the Christians, the Muslims, Muhammad, and combine them with Buddhism. And of all those, and Hinduism, and of all those, he said the most noble was certainly Buddhism or Hinduism, because rather than purporting to tell you about God's will, they were religions based upon the practice of learning to quiet your mind and release the dukkha. In fact, he practiced some of the more controversial forms of Buddhism that even some Buddhists don't do today. But that's going to have to be for another time. I want to show you another image before we wrap up and tell you another story that I only recently learned about while working on this sermon. I think this is it. That I'm about to show you something. Yeah, there we go. So there was a woman one day named Elisabeth Ney. She was a German sculptor who showed up at his apartments when she was some 26 years old. He answered the door himself, lived alone. He had a man who would help him, but only during part of the day. And she burst in through the door and started telling him how she just wishes that he would give her a few sittings. And by the way, my name is Elizabeth Ney, and if you could just, help me out a little bit here. I know nobody gives me any respect because I have this art form that nobody will respect that a girl can possibly do. But I've been doing it all this time, and I took over Mr. Rausch's business and his entire blah 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 blah. He's like, "Who the hell are you?" And she's like, "Oh, like I said, I'm Elizabeth Ney, and I want to get you to sit for me so I can sculpt you." No, I didn't want that. I didn't ask for that. Why would I want that? And she explained to him that she needed a break, basically. That people didn't respect her as a sculptress, as they would say it from then on. And that she needed a good commission. She needed something that people would respect. And he was, after all, a brilliant philosopher from Germany and perhaps the wisest philosopher alive. And after a constant insistence from this young sculptor, he finally agreed to be sculpted by her. And when he showed up to be sculpted by her, he would watch her. In fact, there's a story that he was sitting there. She was working on this bust that she was making out of clay. She would make it in clay, and then she'd take the clay bust back to her studio, and then she would sculpt it in marble. And she looked up to see him glaring at her, kind of smiling. And she asked him, "What's that about?" And he said, "Oh, I was just looking to see if I could discern a little mustache. I've never known a woman to act quite like you do. Okay. And that's when she began to regale him with the story of how she understood his take on women, but she took it from the lens of those women. She didn't like those women either. Nobody likes women like that. Nobody likes to think of women acting like that. But maybe he didn't know all women. And he certainly didn't know a woman like her. That when she was 19 years old, in spite of her parents telling her, pleading with her again and again to take up any other profession but this one, she stormed into a man's studio, Mr. Rausch, I forget his first name, who was one of the better known sculptors, not only in Germany, but in all of Europe, and demanded that he take her on as an apprentice. No, it's not how this is done. And anyway, this isn't an art form for women, anyways. And so she insisted. Sound familiar? And finally, he told her, look, if you wanted to be considered for anything like an apprenticeship, you could have at least brought me an example, a portfolio. Portfolio? Yeah, something that shows that you understand artistic composition of any kind. Well, why didn't you say so? So she walked away and she drew up a sketch and brought it back and handed it to him. There. And he took it and he looked at it and said, all right, I'll take you on as an apprentice. And she went on to take over his business when he passed away. But she couldn't find good commissions, high paying commissions that would make it worthwhile. And, anyways, she was a bit of a controversial figure because she also liked to give speeches, apparently, and she liked to talk about a new subject in the world from the 19th century, feminism. She liked to preach to the world about how if a woman gets married, she's basically forced into a form of domestic slavery. So it came as a great shock to her when her boyfriend proposed to her, and then she was actually engaged to a man. But it was different with her. She loved him. They did eventually marry. But at that time, this 26-year-old girl, young sculptor, very talented artist, couldn't get commissions. He was too controversial. Nobody, she didn't have high enough society of friends. She didn't, whatever. And she was a girl. And so here she was, a 26-year-old young sculptor, a woman, and a 71-year-old, perhaps most notorious philosopher ever, and one of the world's most notorious misogynists at the same time. And he came back for a sitting after having had a chance to get to know this young woman. And he confessed something to her. And he says, hey, Tim. He did say that. I said that. Hey, Tim. And he said to her, I have yet to finish writing everything I have to say about women. I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write it down exactly, but this is the way I remember it. He said, I not only think that women, if they spent enough time alone, which is kind of his shtick, he said everybody should spend more time alone. He was almost certainly autistic, by the way. That if women spent more time alone and being independent from men, they not only could become very contemplative and good thinkers, but they could actually probably be better at it than men. And then he finally just sat. And they became fast friends for the next year. This bust is the only likeness of Arthur Schopenhauer that his friends, critics, the artist, and he himself all agree looked the most like him. And it was the only one he ever liked. Still had the hair. I want to encourage you to look at it for a minute. It's a surly son of a bitch right there, right? And yet, there's a playfulness to it. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't a misogynist, and I'm not saying that makes up for the things he said and did. And I'm not saying that anybody's misogyny or patriarchy is excused by their trauma, or anybody's prejudice of any kind is excused by their trauma. But this is what it means to be alive. We go getting traumatized by our parents, by our siblings, by our peers, and just by life. And like I said before about Buddha or about Schopenhauer, who was born rich, never had to work a day in his life. I remember reading a letter he wrote to his sister Adele, in which they talked about how guilty they had an exchange about how guilty they felt about having inherited their father's money, because it meant that they could never find a way to give it all away, enough of it all to give enough of that money away to make up for the fact that they felt guilty that they never had to work, that they would never in their lives have to provide for themselves. That proved not to be true in the end. His mother and his sister both fell on hard times, especially when they moved into the middle of what soon became a war zone. And while all the other aristocrats and wealthy people had fled into the countryside, strangely enough, the novelist Joanna Schopenhauer and her daughter Adele stayed and actually kind of became war heroes and are celebrated as war heroes there because they provided for the people and took care of people, and they lost their inheritance, they lost their wealth because of it, and ended up, much to their shame, having to resort to coming back to Arthur to provide for them for the rest of their lives, which he did. He and his mother never saw each other again, but they had to reconcile their differences enough to at least accept help and to understand that life isn't simple. And there's no such thing as sin. There's no such thing as redemption. There's no such thing as salvation. There's what makes sense to you here and now. There's your story that you can change here and now. And Arthur Schopenhauer met a 26-year-old sculptor who made him finish his thought on women and come to comprehend, at least for his own benefit. Surely no women of his day ever forgave him for it. And frankly, most women don't like him now. But for his own sake, for his own peace of mind, came to understand that he had been wrong and he had been prejudiced and that he had let circumstances like his father's suicide distract him from what was important. We could all learn a lot from Arthur Schopenhauer. Amen. Okay, so sadly we didn't get Tim. We are going to come back at 10. Let me see if I have a message from him. We're going to come back at 10 p.m., which is in 1 hour, with a message from Mitiga. We wanted to talk about his work in Sonora, maybe talk about some of the work they're doing, with their lawsuit. But I don't know that he wants to talk about that yet. I wanted to share with you guys a closing hymn now that I had written today while I was watching Latter Daily Digest just a couple hours ago. And I thought, wow, I've always thought we need to do something about this situation. And some of you may know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is currently growing in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and where they speak French primarily. The official language is French. And in spite of that fact, I don't think anybody has ever made a conscientious effort to make sure that the people of Congo understand what they get involved in. We saw this certainly with the European missions. Remember, what's his name, Matheson, who, anyways, the Area Authority 70, who left the Mormon Church, saying he'd never been told about polygamy. Not really. That he didn't understand anything about this controversy of why black men couldn't hold the priesthood in the church. That outside of the United States, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints really has this golden opportunity, for the most part, before the internet, to rewrite their story in the least racist way possible, or to sanitize it. And I have thought many times, what it's going to take is the missionaries who taught these people these doctrines to say, I came to your country and I taught you this, but that's because I didn't know better. I know that I wish I could go back to Peru, and at some point I'm sure I can, and I've been planning to tell people there that I was wrong. And so what I've done now is I've launched a new web page on our website at korihor.org, where missionaries will be able to do just exactly that, or effectively that, by submitting your story, writing out your story, and submitting a photo of yourself and your name and what years you were in what mission. So we can begin an effort of creating materials to go out to all of these missions. And can you imagine the movement of all these ex-Mormon returned missionaries reaching out to the people they once preached to say, I didn't know better. And if I could take it back, I would. Maybe we don't all regret our missions. I don't regret mine. I just regret I taught Mormonism. Look for a link here, those of you who want to come back at 10 p.m. Yeah, that's right. Jesse. Let's see if this actually exported. I didn't get a chance to want to review the work before it actually exported. So I may have set this up for nothing. Hold on.
Je suis venu il y a des années, la chemise blanche et la cravate. Je vous parlais d'un prophète d'Amérique. Je vous promettais les bénédictions célestes, mais je vous cachais toute la vérité. Mais je vous aimais, alors je me repens. Pardonnez-moi mes frères et sœurs, vous êtes nobles, vous êtes beaux, sans devoir purifier vos âmes, sans demander pardon pour votre peau. Ce que je taisais, c'était ceci, la malédiction de Caïn sur vous, que nous ne vous aurions pas donné la prêtrise, que vous valiez moins aux yeux de leur Dieu. Jusqu'en 1978, nos prophètes disaient que vous méritiez l'esclavage. Pardonnez-moi mes frères et sœurs, vous êtes nobles, vous êtes beaux, sans devoir purifier vos âmes, sans demander pardon pour votre peau. Il faut du sang à rien pour devenir comme Dieu un jour. Joseph Smith disait que vous deviez être esclave, que Ham avait maudit votre lignée. Ces doctrines-là, je vous les cachais. J'étais un enfant, libérez mon cœur. Pardonnez-moi mes frères et sœurs, vous êtes nobles, vous êtes beaux, sans devoir purifier vos âmes, sans demander pardon pour votre peau. Je ne peux changer ce que j'ai dit, mais je peux devenir un meilleur ami. Ne suivons plus un Dieu fait de préjugés. Je ne suivrai plus ces hommes de haine. Je ne dirai plus ce qu'il faut croire. Mes frères et sœurs du Congo, pardonnez-moi. Pardonnez-moi, mes frères et sœurs. Vous êtes nobles, vous êtes beaux, sans devoir purifier vos âmes, sans demander pardon pour votre peau.